Ma'am, if that SUV had moved 2 more feet, you'd be dead. Ethan Cole's voice came out rough beneath the roar of rain and screaming brakes as he pulled Maya Brooks backward across the slick Chicago sidewalk. Her black work shoes scraped against the pavement, her heartbeat slamming so hard inside her chest, it almost drowned out the blaring hotel alarms behind them. A black Escalade sat half-crushed against a concrete pillar outside the Hale Regency Hotel, steam curling from beneath the hood, while shattered headlights flickered weakly through the storm like dying lanterns. People gathered beneath the gold awning, wealthy guests clutching designer coats and champagne glasses, their shocked faces glowing beneath the white marble lights of the entrance. But no one looked at Maya first. They looked at the damaged SUV. They looked at the inconvenience. Maya stood frozen in her soaked housekeeping uniform, rainwater dripping from the edge of her braided hair onto the collar of her gray coat. Her hands trembled violently. Ethan noticed it immediately. Not dramatic fear. Not panic. The kind of shaking that came after someone realized how close death had just passed them by. Easy, he said quietly, loosening his grip on her arm. You're okay. Maya tried to answer, but her throat locked tight. Across the street, thunder rolled low between the skyscrapers while red brake lights reflected across the wet pavement like rivers of bloodless fire. Then Ethan finally looked directly at her face and froze. 3 days earlier, he had stood outside a traffic court office 12 miles south of downtown with handcuffs around his wrists and $1,247 in unpaid citations threatening to take away his courier license. One more violation and the city would impound his delivery van permanently. His entire livelihood sat on the edge of disappearing because he'd missed court while delivering medical supplies during a blizzard. Nobody cared. Not the clerk behind the bulletproof glass. Not the officer writing the paperwork. Certainly not the people walking past him pretending not to stare. Then somehow, minutes before processing, someone had quietly paid the fine in full. Cash. No name. No explanation. Just a folded receipt and 7 handwritten words. Everyone deserves one more chance. Ethan had read that note at least 20 times since then. And now, standing beneath the cold glow of the Hale Regency entrance, staring into Maya Brooks' exhausted brown eyes, he recognized her immediately. The same eyes. The same calm sadness. Maya looked away first, like she already regretted being seen. Hotel security finally rushed outside wearing navy jackets and polished shoes that splashed through puddles without slowing. Ma'am, are you injured? One guard asked quickly, though his attention never fully left the SUV. Another security manager leaned toward the driver's side window, already muttering about insurance claims and press attention. Maya swallowed hard. I'm fine, she whispered. But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. Something cold had started crawling up the back of his neck. His eyes drifted toward the Escalade, toward the twisted front tire still spinning slowly in the rain, toward the oily black streak beneath the vehicle, then toward the dashcam mounted inside his Courier truck parked crooked across the curb. The small red recording light was still blinking, still recording everything. Ethan's jaw tightened, because 30 minutes earlier, before the crash, before the screaming tires, before Maya nearly died, he remembered seeing someone kneeling beside that exact SUV in the underground parking garage. And suddenly, the storm around him no longer felt random at all. The rain finally began to weaken, but the cold wind cutting through downtown Chicago still carried the smell of burned rubber and wet concrete across the Hale Regency driveway. Maya Brooks sat quietly inside the employee medical office on the first floor of the hotel, a paper cup of untouched tea cooling slowly between her hands. The fluorescent light above her buzzed softly, washing the small room in pale white shadows. Her uniform sleeves were still damp from the storm. Every few seconds, she rubbed her fingers together like she was trying to convince herself she was still here, still breathing. Outside the closed office door, expensive shoes clicked rapidly across marble floors, while hotel staff whispered to each other in nervous voices. Someone important had almost died in front of the hotel entrance. That was all management cared about. Not Maya. Not the maid nobody noticed until something terrible nearly happened to her. Across the lobby, Ethan Cole stood beside his Courier truck with rain dripping from the edge of his dark jacket as he replayed the dashcam footage for the 3rd time. The tiny screen reflected against his tired eyes while headlights from passing traffic streaked across the windshield. At first, the recording looked ordinary. Cars entering the underground garage, valets moving luggage carts, hotel guests stepping out beneath umbrellas. Then exactly 37 minutes before the crash, the footage caught movement near Maya's SUV. A man wearing a black maintenance jacket crouched beside the front driver's side tire. His face stayed hidden beneath a baseball cap, but his posture was calm, focused, deliberate. Ethan leaned closer. The man slid underneath the vehicle for almost 40 seconds before standing again and walking away toward the service elevator. Ethan paused the video. His stomach tightened instantly. He knew that elevator. Employees used it to access restricted maintenance corridors beneath the hotel. This was not random. A sharp voice suddenly interrupted him. "You cannot park this truck here." Ethan looked up to find a tall white man in a tailored charcoal coat standing beneath the awning. Silver cufflinks. Perfect posture. Expensive watch. The kind of man who had never worried about overdue bills in his life. Daniel Mercer, head of security for the Hale Regency. Ethan recognized him immediately from previous deliveries. Mercer's sharp blue eyes drifted briefly toward the dashcam screen before returning to Ethan's face. "Hotel property is private," Mercer said calmly. "Move your vehicle." Ethan did not move. "Funny thing about private property," he replied quietly. "It usually has cameras." Mercer's expression barely shifted, but something colder entered his eyes. "Are you accusing someone of something?" Ethan studied him carefully. Mercer's voice stayed smooth, but his right hand tightened almost invisibly against the umbrella handle. Tiny details. The kind people missed unless they spent years reading dangerous situations. Ethan had learned that skill long before Courier work. Long before Chicago. "I saw somebody under her SUV before the brakes failed," Ethan said. "My dashcam recorded it." Silence. Rainwater dripped steadily from the edge of the awning between them. Somewhere down the block, a siren echoed through traffic. Mercer finally stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then you should delete that footage." Ethan blinked once. Slowly. "Why would I do that?" Mercer's face remained unreadable. "Because people misunderstand things. Especially people who do not belong in situations above their pay grade." Ethan felt the meaning behind the words immediately. The same kind of polished contempt he had heard 1,000 times before. Not loud. Not obvious. The kind rich people wrapped inside professional smiles. Ethan glanced through the hotel windows toward the medical office hallway where Maya sat alone behind frosted glass. Invisible again. Mercer followed his gaze briefly before speaking one final time. "Take your delivery truck and go home, Mr. Cole." Then he turned and walked back inside without another word. But Ethan did not start the engine. He looked back down at the frozen frame on the dashcam screen. The crouched figure beneath Maya's SUV. The maintenance jacket. The hidden face. And suddenly one terrifying thought settled heavily into his chest. Whoever tampered with those brakes had not just wanted to scare Maya Brooks. They wanted her gone before she could say something. By midnight, the Hale Regency looked less like a hotel and more like a fortress hiding a secret. The marble lobby glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, while wealthy guests laughed softly over wine glasses as if nothing had happened outside just hours earlier. But beneath the polished floors and gold-trimmed walls, tension moved quietly through the building like smoke trapped behind closed doors. Maya Brooks stepped out of the employee medical office holding her small canvas bag against her chest. Her shift should have ended 3 hours ago, yet nobody had officially told her. She could leave. Nobody apologized either. A young receptionist glanced at her briefly before looking away again, embarrassed by the silence hanging around her. Maya understood that silence well. She had lived inside it most of her life. The silence people used when they did not want to admit they had almost ignored your death. She walked carefully through the back hallway toward the employee lockers, her shoes squeaking faintly against polished tiles still damp from the storm outside. Every muscle in her body felt heavy. Not injured. Just exhausted in the deep, invisible way fear exhausted people after adrenaline disappeared. She reached her locker and slowly opened the dented metal door. Inside sat a folded pharmacy receipt, a pack of crackers, and a photograph taped near the top corner. Her mother smiling from a hospital bed last Christmas. Maya touched the edge of the picture gently before closing her eyes for a second. "You still here?" The voice startled her softly. She turned to see Carmen Ruiz standing near the doorway holding a janitor cart with fresh towels stacked neatly on top. Carmen had worked nights at the hotel almost 12 years and carried herself with the tired strength of someone who had seen too much and kept surviving anyway. They should have sent you home hours ago, Carmen muttered. Maya forced a small smile. I'm heading out now. Carmen studied her face carefully. You know everybody upstairs is talking about the accident. Maya lowered her eyes toward the locker floor. It was not an accident. The words slipped out quietly before she could stop them. Carmen's expression changed instantly. What do you mean? Maya hesitated. The hallway lights buzzed softly overhead, while somewhere far above them an elevator chimed. Then finally she whispered, Yesterday during the gala setup, I overheard something. Carmen moved closer immediately. What kind of something? Maya swallowed hard. Two men arguing in conference room B on the 32nd floor. One of them mentioned hidden accounts. Transfers. Somebody said if the auditors saw the files, careers would end. Carmen frowned slowly. Who were they? Maya shook her head. I could not see. Clearly. I was changing linens in the hallway when the doors opened. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. But one of the voices belonged to Daniel Mercer. Silence settled heavily between them. Carmen glanced nervously toward the hallway entrance before lowering her voice. Maya, people do not talk about Mercer around here. Why? Carmen exhaled slowly. Because things happen to employees who make problems for management. Before Maya could answer, footsteps echoed sharply through the corridor. Both women looked up instantly. Daniel Mercer appeared at the far end of the hallway wearing the same charcoal coat, perfectly dry despite the rain outside. His expression remained calm, almost pleasant, but his eyes locked directly onto Maya. He stopped several feet away from her locker. Miss Brooks, he said smoothly, corporate would like a formal statement from you tomorrow morning regarding the vehicle incident. Maya nodded carefully. Yes, sir. Mercer studied her for another long second. Then his gaze drifted briefly toward the taped photograph inside her locker. You should be careful walking home tonight, he said quietly. Chicago can be dangerous after midnight. The words sounded polite, but something underneath them felt ice cold. Maya felt it immediately. So did Carmen. Mercer gave one small professional smile before turning and disappearing down the hallway. The moment he vanished around the corner, Carmen grabbed Maya's wrist tightly. Do not go home alone. Maya tried to speak, but her phone suddenly vibrated inside her bag. Unknown number. Her chest tightened as she answered softly. Hello. For 2 seconds there was only static. Then a man's voice whispered one sentence so quietly it almost disappeared beneath the crackling line. Check under your car before you drive again. The call disconnected instantly. The parking garage beneath the Hale Regency smelled like motor oil, rainwater, and cold concrete as Maya Brooks walked beside Carmen Ruiz toward her aging silver Honda Civic parked near the farm maintenance wall. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, leaving soft shadows stretched across the empty lower level like something alive was moving between the columns. Maya held her phone tightly in one hand, still hearing the anonymous voice from the call repeating inside her head. Check under your car before you drive again. Carmen stayed close beside her, arms crossed tightly against the cold. I do not like this, she muttered quietly. None of this feels normal anymore. Maya nodded without speaking. Her chest still felt tight from Daniel Mercer's warning upstairs. The calmness in his voice frightened her more than shouting would have. Because men like Mercer never needed to raise their voices. They already believed the world belonged to them. They reached Maya's Honda. The old sedan looked harmless beneath the pale garage lights, water dripping slowly from the bumper after the storm outside. But Maya stopped walking the moment she noticed the driver's side door slightly open. Just an inch. Her stomach dropped immediately. I locked it, she whispered. Carmen grabbed her arm. Do not touch anything. The garage suddenly felt too quiet. No engines. No footsteps. Just the distant hum of ventilation fans somewhere deep underground. Maya slowly stepped backward as Carmen pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. But before she could dial security, headlights suddenly flashed across the garage entrance ramp. Ethan Cole's Courier truck rolled down slowly between the concrete pillars before stopping near them. He stepped out immediately, eyes scanning the garage the second he saw Maya standing frozen beside the open car door. Do not get inside that vehicle, he said sharply. Maya looked at him in shock. How did you know I was here? Ethan ignored the question. He crouched beside the Honda carefully, his Courier jacket brushing against the wet pavement as he reached beneath the front bumper. For several tense seconds, nobody moved. Then Ethan slowly pulled out a small black device attached near the undercarriage with magnets and wires. Carmen gasped softly. Maya's blood turned cold. "What is that?" she whispered. Ethan stood carefully, rainwater dripping from his sleeves onto the concrete floor. "Tracker," he said quietly. "Somebody wanted to know exactly where you went tonight." Maya stared at the device in disbelief. Her knees suddenly felt weak. Ethan studied the tracker for another second before looking toward the security camera mounted high above the garage exit. "And I think whoever planted it expected you to leave alone." Carmen crossed herself softly beneath her breath. Maya wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her breathing. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Why would anyone do this?" Ethan looked directly at her. "Because you heard something important." Silence settled heavily between them. Somewhere far above the garage ceiling, thunder rolled faintly through the city again. Maya finally lowered her eyes. "I heard Mercer arguing with someone during the gala," she admitted softly. "Something about hidden transfers and auditors." Ethan's jaw tightened immediately. "Did they see you?" "I do not know." He glanced again toward the security camera, then assumed they did. Maya felt fear creeping slowly deeper into her chest now, colder than before. Not fear from the crash. Not fear from almost dying. This was different. The terrifying realization that somebody with power had already decided her life was disposable. Ethan suddenly reached into his pocket and handed her a folded receipt protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. Maya blinked in confusion before carefully opening it. Her eyes widened instantly. It was the courthouse receipt from 3 days earlier. The unpaid fine she had secretly covered for him. "You knew?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded once. "I recognized your handwriting on the note." Maya looked away immediately, embarrassed by being seen. Ethan lowered his voice. "You helped me when nobody else would. So now I am asking you something." She looked back at him carefully. "What?" Ethan's expression hardened slightly as he glanced again toward the dark corners of the garage. "Do not trust anyone inside this hotel." Before Maya could answer, the security camera above them slowly tilted downward with a faint mechanical sound until it pointed directly at the three of them. The tiny red light on the security camera blinked once above the parking garage exit, steady and watchful, like the building itself had suddenly turned against them. Maya Brooks instinctively stepped backward toward Ethan Cole's truck, while Carmen Ruiz stared upward with fear written plainly across her face. "They are watching us right now," Carmen whispered. Ethan did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the camera for several long seconds before he slipped the tracking device into his jacket pocket. "Get inside the truck," he said quietly. Maya hesitated. "What about my car?" Ethan looked at the silver Honda sitting alone beneath the flickering garage lights. "Leave it." Something in his tone made her stop asking questions. They climbed into the Courier truck quickly, the doors locking with a heavy mechanical click that suddenly felt louder than the storm outside. Rain tapped softly against the windshield while Ethan started the engine and pulled slowly toward the garage ramp. Maya sat rigid in the passenger seat, holding her canvas bag tightly against her chest. Carmen stayed beside her in silence, fingers nervously twisting the silver cross necklace around her neck. Nobody spoke until the truck finally merged into late-night traffic along Michigan Avenue. Chicago looked almost unreal after midnight. Wet streets glowing gold beneath traffic lights. Steam rising from subway grates. Reflections stretching across glass towers while distant sirens echoed somewhere near the river. Ethan drove with both hands tied on the wheel, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. "You think somebody followed us?" Maya asked softly. Ethan's jaw shifted slightly. "I think people with money do not leave loose ends." Carmen muttered something in Spanish beneath her breath before looking toward Maya. "You need to disappear for a few days?" Maya shook her head immediately. "I cannot. My mother has dialysis tomorrow morning." Silence. Ethan glanced briefly toward her. "Where is she staying?" "St. Mary's Care Center on the west side." Ethan nodded once without speaking again. Maya lowered her eyes toward her hands. "I never should have listened outside that conference room." Ethan finally answered quietly. "No, they never should have assumed nobody would notice." The words settled heavily. Inside the truck, Maya stared out the passenger window as rain streaked across the glass. She remembered the gala night clearly now. Crystal chandeliers, Politicians laughing over champagne. Expensive perfume drifting through the hallways while employees like her moved silently carrying trays and changing linens like ghosts nobody bothered to see. She had not meant to overhear anything. She had simply paused outside conference room B after hearing raised voices behind the doors. One voice belonged to Daniel Mercer. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. The second voice sounded nervous. Older. Male. The auditors already flagged the offshore accounts. The man had whispered sharply. If this leaks before the election, Victoria Hale is finished. Maya remembered freezing beside the linen cart. Then Mercer's voice came low and cold. Then make sure there is nothing left to leak. Her breathing tightened just remembering it. Ethan suddenly slowed the truck near a red light. His eyes narrowed toward the mirror again. A black sedan had turned behind them 2 blocks earlier and stayed there ever since. Same distance. Same lane changes. Do not look back, Ethan said calmly. Maya's stomach dropped immediately. Someone is following us. Maybe. The traffic light turned green. Ethan made a sudden right turn down a narrower side street lined with dark brick buildings and closed storefronts. The black sedan turned too. Carmen inhaled sharply. Rain hammered harder now, blurring the windshield beneath the sweeping wipers. Ethan's voice stayed steady, but Maya noticed the muscles tightening along his jaw. Listen carefully, he said. If something happens, you stay inside this truck no matter what. Maya looked at him in fear. Ethan, promise me. Before she could answer, bright headlights suddenly flooded the rear window as the black sedan accelerated directly toward them. Hold on. Ethan Cole's voice cut sharply through the pounding rain as the black sedan surged closer behind them, its headlights flooding the inside of the Courier truck with harsh white light. Maya Brooks gripped the edge of her seat while Carmen Ruiz whispered prayers under her breath beside her. Outside, the narrow Chicago side street glistened beneath sheets of rain, reflections trembling across brick walls and dark storefront windows. Ethan turned the steering wheel hard left onto another street barely wide enough for 2 vehicles. Tires hissed against wet pavement. The black sedan followed instantly. Too fast. Too deliberate. Maya's pulse hammered painfully in her throat now. Why are they doing this? She whispered. Ethan kept his eyes on the mirror. Because they are scared. Of what? Ethan glanced at her for half a second. Of what you heard. The sedan accelerated again, closing the distance until Maya could no longer see the road behind them through the blinding headlights. Her breathing turned shallow. Every instinct told her something terrible was closing in around them. Ethan suddenly reached into the center console and pulled out a small flash drive attached to his keychain. He shoved it into Maya's trembling hands. If anything happens tonight, you keep this. Maya stared down at it in confusion. What is it? Backup copy of the dashcam footage. Her eyes widened instantly. Ethan lowered his voice. I learned a long time ago not to trust only one copy of evidence. Carmen looked between them nervously. Police, she whispered suddenly. Why do we not just go to the police? Ethan's jaw tightened. Because men like Mercer usually know who answers those phones. Silence. Heavy and suffocating. Rain slammed harder against the windshield while the sedan remained glued behind them like a shadow refusing to disappear. Then Ethan made another sudden turn beneath the elevated train tracks and pulled sharply into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, glowing pale blue against the storm. The sign outside flickered weakly. Wells Street Grill. 2 police cruisers sat near the entrance beneath the awning. Ethan exhaled slowly for the first time in minutes. Good, he muttered. Witnesses. The black sedan slowed at the edge of the parking lot. For several tense seconds it remained motionless in the rain. Then slowly, without rolling down the windows or revealing the driver, it backed away and disappeared into traffic. Maya finally released a shaky breath. She did not realize she had been holding. Ethan turned off the engine but kept watching the street carefully. Stay here, he said quietly. I am checking something. Before Maya could answer, he stepped into the rain and walked toward the rear of the truck. Carmen immediately grabbed Maya's hand. This is bad, she whispered. This is much bigger than hotel money. Maya stared through the fogged windshield at Ethan moving around the vehicle beneath the diner lights. He crouched near the back bumper for several seconds before standing very still. Something about the way his shoulders stiffened made Maya's stomach tighten again. He returned to the driver's side window slowly and knocked once. Maya rolled it down halfway. Rain and cold air rushed instantly into the cab. Ethan held up a second tracking device attached beneath the truck. Smaller than the first one. Newer. More advanced. Maya felt her blood run cold. They put one on my truck too, he said quietly. Carmen covered her mouth in shock. Ethan looked directly at Maya now, rainwater dripping from his hair onto his jacket collar. This was never about the accident. Maya's voice barely came out above a whisper. Then what is it about? Ethan glanced toward the dark street where the sedan had vanished. Whatever is hidden inside that hotel is important enough for somebody to track everyone connected to you. The diner door opened behind him as one of the police officers stepped outside carrying coffee. Warm light spilled briefly across the wet parking lot. But Ethan did not wave for help. He did not move toward the officers at all, because at that exact moment, his phone buzzed inside his pocket with an incoming message from an unknown number. He opened it slowly. Then all the color drained from his face. Maya leaned forward immediately. What is it? Ethan looked up at her with something close to disbelief in his eyes. The text message contained only one sentence. We know about St. Mary's Care Center. For a long moment, nobody inside the truck spoke. The laptop screen continued glowing softly in the darkness while rainwater slid down the windshield in slow silver lines. Maya Brooks stared at the frozen image of Daniel Mercer standing beside the loading dock, calm and composed beneath the hotel security lights, as if discussing the destruction of another human life was no more important than reviewing inventory sheets. Her chest felt hollow now, not shocked anymore, just painfully aware. Ethan slowly removed the flash drive from the laptop and slipped it back into Maya's trembling hand. This changes everything, he said quietly. Maya looked down at the drive resting in her palm. Tiny, fragile, yet powerful enough to destroy people who believed they could never be touched. Carmen Ruiz crossed herself again softly in the back seat. You need federal investigators, she whispered. Not local police. Ethan nodded once. I know someone. Maya looked up immediately. Ethan leaned back against the seat, eyes fixed on the rain outside. Before Courier work, I spent 6 years transporting digital evidence for a private cybersecurity firm. Most of our clients were federal contractors. Maya blinked slightly. You never said that. Ethan gave a tired half smile, without humor. Most people stop listening after they see the delivery uniform. The words settled heavily inside the truck because Maya understood them too well. People saw Maid uniforms the same way. Like proof your voice mattered less before you even opened your mouth. Ethan reached for his phone and scrolled quickly through old contacts before stopping on one name. Rebecca Sloan, Federal Financial Crimes Division. He hesitated for only a second before pressing call. The line rang twice. Then a woman answered immediately, sharp and alert even after midnight. This better not be another traffic ticket, Cole. Ethan's expression remained serious. Rebecca, I have evidence connected to election laundering and attempted witness silencing tied to the Hale Foundation. Silence. Then the woman's voice changed instantly. Explain. Ethan glanced briefly toward Maya before speaking carefully. I cannot over the phone. But if your office still cares about offshore campaign money, you need to meet us tonight. Another pause. Where are you? Ethan looked through the windshield towards St. Mary's entrance. West side. Near St. Mary's Care Center. Rebecca Sloan answered immediately this time. Do not move. And do not trust local law enforcement until I arrive. The call disconnected. Maya released a shaky breath she had been holding for almost a full minute. You trust her? Ethan nodded once. More than I trust Mercer. Outside the truck, the hospital entrance door slid open as a nurse stepped outside for a cigarette break beneath the awning. Warm yellow light spilled briefly across the wet sidewalk before the doors closed again. Maya stared toward the building silently. My mother cannot get dragged into this. Ethan looked at her carefully. Then we finish this before they get close enough to hurt her. Maya lowered her eyes again. Fear still lived inside her chest, but something else had begun growing beside it now. Anger. Quiet. Controlled. The kind that came when somebody finally realized their kindness had been mistaken for weakness. Her phone suddenly buzzed in her coat pocket. Unknown number again. Maya froze instantly. Ethan reached for the phone first. Speaker, he said quietly. Maya answered with trembling fingers. For several seconds there was only static. Then Daniel Mercer's calm voice filled the truck so softly it almost sounded gentle. Miss Brooks, he said, you should have gone home when you had the chance. Carmen covered her mouth in fear. Ethan's eyes hardened instantly. Maya forced herself to speak. You tried to kill me. Mercer exhaled slowly on the other end of the line. No, Miss Brooks. I tried to solve a problem quietly. Maya felt ice crawl down her spine. Mercer continued calmly. People like you survive by remaining invisible. The moment you start believing your voice matters in rooms above your station, unfortunate things happen. Ethan clenched the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. But Maya suddenly stopped shaking. Her eyes lifted slowly toward the glowing hospital windows above them, toward the third floor where her mother slept peacefully, trusting the world to still contain decent people somewhere inside it. When Maya spoke again, her voice came out low and steady. You made one mistake tonight, Mr. Mercer. Silence answered her. Then Maya tightened her grip around the flash drive and whispered, You finally noticed me. By sunrise, the storm over Chicago had finally broken apart into pale gray clouds drifting slowly above the skyline. The streets still glistened from the rain, reflecting early morning light across windows, traffic signals, and puddles gathered along the curbs outside St. Mary's Care Center. Maya Brooks stood quietly near the hospital entrance wearing the same damp gray coat from the night before, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. She had not slept. None of them had. Across the street, two black federal SUVs sat parked beside the curb while agents in dark jackets moved quickly in and out of the buildings surrounding the Hale Regency. Phones were ringing across half the city by now. Lawyers waking up. Reporters receiving anonymous leaks. Bank records getting pulled before sunrise. Powerful people suddenly realizing the walls around them were no longer protecting them. Ethan Cole leaned against his Courier truck nearby, exhaustion visible beneath his eyes, but calmer now than Maya had seen him all night. His phone buzzed constantly with updates from Rebecca Sloan's team. Offshore accounts confirmed. Security footage recovered. Corporate archives seized before dawn. Daniel Mercer disappeared sometime around 4 in the morning after federal agents entered the hotel. Nobody knew where he went. Victoria Hale had already released a public statement claiming she knew nothing about illegal transfers connected to her foundation. But the evidence said otherwise. Maya stared quietly toward the awakening city while cold morning wind moved softly through the street. I still cannot believe all this started because I stopped outside one conference room, she whispered. Ethan looked at her carefully. No, it started because decent people kept pretending silence was safer. Maya lowered her eyes toward the coffee cup between her hands. For most of her life, people had looked through her instead of at her. Wealthy hotel guests snapping fingers for fresh towels without learning her name. Managers speaking around her like she was. Furniture standing beside the wall. Security guards watching her more closely than the people stealing from the minibar upstairs. Invisible. Useful. Replaceable. Until the moment she accidentally heard something powerful people wanted buried forever. Then suddenly everybody saw her. A soft mechanical sound interrupted her thoughts as the hospital entrance doors opened behind them. A nurse slowly wheeled Maya's mother outside wrapped in a warm blanket so she could breathe fresh air before morning dialysis. Maya's face softened instantly. Mama. Her mother smiled weakly the moment she saw her daughter standing there safe. You stayed out all night again, she said gently. Maya laughed softly for the first time in hours, though tears immediately filled her eyes afterward. She crouched beside the wheelchair and carefully adjusted the blanket around her mother's shoulders. Ethan watched quietly from several feet away, giving them privacy without walking away completely. Maya's mother noticed him almost immediately. Who is that? She asked softly. Maya glanced back toward Ethan standing beneath the pale morning light beside the old Courier truck. Somebody who saw me when nobody else did, she answered quietly. Ethan lowered his eyes slightly after hearing that. No arrogance. No performance. Just quiet understanding passing between two exhausted people who both knew what it felt like to move through the world unseen. Across the street, one of the federal agents stepped out of an SUV and nodded toward Ethan. Time to leave. Time to testify. Time for powerful people to finally answer questions they thought nobody beneath them could ever ask. Maya slowly stood again. Her mother reached for her hand gently. You okay, baby? Maya looked toward the sunrise.